Hi and welcome to yet another review. Not sure how quick this will be, but again this is about S1000RR model year 2018 and the latest change and the reason why I changed something on this bike already. So if you look at my previous videos, you could notice that at some point I had S1000RR model year 2012, and then in 2018 I bought this bike knowing that actually the new one is coming, but because with a BMW first 2 years quite dangerous to buy because of some of the things and recalls they usually do on those bikes, so I decided to go with this model because this manufactures with little changes for approximately well, almost 10 years by that time, from 2009. And so I decided, okay, so probably most of the bars already fixed on this bike in terms of like whatever recalls and everything else, so we know what we're doing, and so I bought this one instead. And because it was pretty much second part of actually probably like last third of a season here, and we only had this one bike in a dealership at that point in time because we also knew what the new model is coming. So I only had an option to buy it with a DDC suspension, so this specific bike. And so I bought it hoping that the DDC will work really well, as it worked well for me on ESA, it is called on R1200GS adventure, which I had before, and I hoped that on this bike it will work equally well. Apparently it didn't, and so I started to figure out what is actually happening, so what's going on. In my previous videos you could see some of the things like experiments which I did and conclusions which I come up with regarding this bike at that point in time. So now 4,500 kilometers later and few months where I couldn't ride the bike because of the winter, so season is closed for now at least 3 months or so. So I was thinking, okay, so what's going on with this bike? And because I had 2012 model, I remember my feelings and the changes I did in that bike to make it work well. And when I started to compare, and also I had some measurements from that bike before in terms of geometry, and I tried to apply it here and see so what kind of a difference we have here. So what my conclusion was, and I also have 200 by 55 rear tire, which is a valid option on this bike, but you have to take this bike to a BMW dealership to reprogram it to use this tire, and that's a must for traction control to work correctly. So anyway, long story short, hopefully, so conclusion was the following. So the forks on these bikes, the effective length of a fork, which basically shorter comparing to 2012 model. What does it mean, effective length? So if you measure the fork fully extended, like when the top out springs are compressed and the weight applied, like pulling the fork down to completely compress top out springs within the forks, the travel, the distance actually between this point over here, which I call axle casting, this part, up to the bottom of a rubber dust seal over here, when the fork is completely extended, is 3.5 millimeters shorter comparing to 2012 model bike. And also when the bike sits on its own weight, or when you apply the rider to the bike, it still sits shorter comparing to 2012. 2012 would be around here, for example, at the same conditions. Also 2012 has a hydraulic bottom out, which means it has a cone which goes into a I don't know, a hole filled with oil, and this is how it stops, by pushing oil out of this hole. So this one has rubber dampers at the bottom, so when you bottom out you're compressing the rubber dampers. So this, in this terms, this design is better, so you have longer range per se before fork becomes extremely hard and it's coming down to the bottom. That is more, let's say, softer bottom out comparing to hydraulic one, so that's a plus. But effective range, where the fork is working, like effective high, sorry, when the fork is working, is shorter than 2012 bike because of these two factors which I mentioned. So one is that the fully extended fork is actually shorter, It means that internally the cartridge allows for less extension, and at the same time, because of a different top-out spring design, which I think on this bike is excessively heavy top-out springs and long, the bike sits lower comparing to 2012 bike. So because of that, the front actually, comparing to 2012, on the stock settings it sits lower than 2012. So in the rear, in stock configuration, the wheelbase is extended due to the rear axle moved further to the back by using longer chain. So on 2012 it was 118 links. On this one is 120. It was, sorry, from the stock 120, which extends the wheelbase comparing to 2012 by 16 millimeters, the length of a chain link basically. So also the swing arm pivots moved down by 3 millimeters, which was a good change for 2012. And so linkage on this bike is similar to HP4 linkage, and the shock length obviously longer because of a different linkage, and that is probably to accommodate all the DDC cartridge type of setup inside the shock. So all these changes, and when I've been riding this bike, I always felt that even on the stock settings, stock preload, which is fully out on the forks and on the shock, the bike feels strange. So it always felt like it has too much weight on the front wheel. Maybe it's down to my riding position, because I like to sit really close to the tank and just lay on the tank all the time, especially even in the turns. For me, the rear wheel had not enough traction, especially if you're going down hills and there is a turn going downhill and then turn left or right. So I felt like, and also not just felt, I had few slippages of the rear wheel as well. Thanks to traction control, didn't crash, but it wasn't pleasant. At the same time, going uphill into the turn felt perfectly well in the rear, so rear was stable and planted. And of course there is a damping to that, but settings all the zeros and correctly calibrated suspension sensor at BMW dealership, zero position, still felt the same way. And so I said, okay, so what is wrong with this bike then? So why? And in 2012, longer wheelbase because of a shock construction and a swing arm linkage construction, longer wheelbase was good, because you could raise the bikes on the forks completely, so only fork caps were showing. And I have a video about that also, somewhere between my videos from a long time ago. So in that case, that configuration for 2012 with long wheelbase worked really nicely. For this one it doesn't. And partially the reason to that is the lower front end, as it like effectively riding on the road. And the linkage, I guess, which is similar to HP4, less progressive. And so I thought, okay, so what can be done to fix it? Also another thing is, well, you can see that change in the bike, like configuration of the bike is all tilted forward comparing to 2012 bike. If you look at the rake and trail numbers, even provided by the BMW, so it's lost about half degree of fork angle and lost some trail too. Don't recall exactly how many millimeters there. So it all points that the bike is not heavy, sitting lower in the front. And so I said, okay, so how can I fix this? And of course, easiest fixed is to extend the forks maximum. So you extend the bike on the forks, lift it up in the front, which I did, and you can see my lower portion of the fork cap is now flushed with a top triple clamp, and this is pretty much as high as we want to go here. And I changed the chain, so I changed it to 118 links to move the rear axle forward by 16 millimeters. So this configuration pretty much in terms of swing arm length and 118 links chain was found in 2012 on HP4, not HP4S, but the older HP4. And so magically now, the strange thing is, I used to have, let's say, 35 millimeter sag on the stock configuration here, this rider sag, like from fully extended to the case where my weight is applied to the bike. I don't remember the front, but it was more than 40, a full preload out. So now magically when I did this change, when I sit on the bike, my front is at 40 millimeters. If you measure the full travel, because if you just leave the bike hanging, you won't get 120 millimeters here. It will be something like 114, I think. But if I sit on the bike and measure from the bottom, because I know what the maximum here is 120, I measured that exactly, extending the top out spring specifically, 120. So I'm sitting at 8 centimeters or 80 millimeters from the bottom, which is fine. That kind of gives me, well, effective sag would be 30, 34, I think, something like that, and 8 from here, right? So it's 120 total, but never achieved because of a top out spring. So 114 to 80, that's a 34 millimeters, right? So that is kind of a right sag for like stiffer front springs, which is fine with all the preload out. You can see the preload adjuster fully out. But effectively you have still 8 centimeters or 80 millimeters here, which corresponds to usual like a normal fork sag of a 40. This is great, right? This is fine setup now. Just because of a change in the rear, this is restored. Because I used to, probably it used to be like 2 millimeters more. It used to be when I sit on the bike, the front would collapse, 2 millimeters more, I think. So I gained 2 millimeters here and something like that, and I gained some, maybe even more. Anyway, it doesn't remember. I'm not gonna lie to you now. So basically, the front is effectively higher right now, sitting higher, right? And it's sitting higher because the bike is lifted on the forks here. And my friend, my nephew, helped me to measure the rear sag today. And with my civilian gear, not the motorcycle clothes, but the civilian gear, which is like it's winter now, I don't know. My total weight approximately like 80, I guess 87 maybe at the moment with a civilian clothes on the bike. The rear sag is at 31 millimeter, exactly. So this is very close to good setup, I think, for the bike, just with one change. Oh, sorry, not just one change. I also changed this top shock mount eccentric. If you can see it here, it's quite dark. It's right here, and you can see it has a center, like a hole right in the center of it. It's standard, which comes with a bike, supposed to be mounted down, and the offset of that is 1.5 millimeters. So I got this from Forsaken Motorsports, I think, with a 0 offset. And interestingly, I also found the drawings of 2015 model, 3D drawings, which are part of a press release for a 2015 bike, and on that you could see that the actual rear axle position is exactly as it is at the moment, right? So we plan to use this bike with 118 links chain, and an eccentric with a hole in the center, which could be seen from that drawing as well. But at some point in time we just decided to change it, so everything went strange ways, I think. So anyway, right now rake and trail numbers more close to, again, question how you measure them, but if you measure them when the bike is sitting on this free sag, it's the forks angle is 24 degrees and the swing arm angle is at 10.4. So now if you convert that to, let's say, proper measurement, like with a fully extended wheels, like bike barely touching the ground with the wheels, I guess by projection would be what rear would be about 12.3, and the front fork angle would be something like 24.3 degrees, which is good average numbers. So again, just couple little changes, with a major is being a chain. Kind of fixed it. Well, I need to ride it to see like how it dynamically would feel now, but I need to wait another 3 months for that. But generically, it feels at the moment what the change was right decision. Change of eccentric and a hole in the middle. And of course I have to bring it to a BMW dealership once over again to recalibrate the suspension, rear suspension sensor, set it to the 0 factory position. You cannot do that from the dashboard properly. The dashboard is only accommodates for the changes in the preload of the spring, not for the zeroing of the actual sensor properly. Alright, so these are the thoughts at the moment. Also what I want to mention, because I removed the old chain, I want to show it to you. So it has very strange O-rings, so the chain feels completely wooden, right? It's not bending very well. So my guess is because of the O-ring construction of this chain, you have huge power loss on it. So it's a good practice to change it. So I put in DID ZVMX 525 chain, which is much more flexible, and I guess that will decrease the power loss in the drivetrain completely to a different level comparing to a stock chain. I believe that. So I think maybe good for you just to change the chain anyway, even to a stock length if you like how a bike handles at the moment, your bike. And that's it. That's a quick review, 16 minutes. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye bye.